When in high school, my bully gleefully taunted me with "You'll die alone and forgotten." I never imagined that years later I'd end up marrying his widowed father, becoming his stepmother, and living every day under the same roof as the boy who once made my life a nightmare. Tyler Morrison made my junior year a nightmare. Every day he'd corner me by my locker with his group, calling me freak girl because I read at lunch instead of chatting about boys. He'd swap my books from my hands, trip me in the corridors, and make loud remarks about my clothing whenever I walked past his table. The worst incident happened during homecoming week. I was sitting alone in the cafeteria, trying to finish my chemistry homework, when Tyler suddenly stood up on his chair. The entire room fell silent as he pointed directly at me. "Look at Sarah Chen over there," he announced loudly. "Eating lunch alone again? Doing homework like the pathetic loser she is? I bet she's so strange that she'll probably die alone and forgotten in some cat-filled apartment someday." The entire cafeteria erupted in laughter. Even the teachers pretended not to hear. I felt my face flush with humiliation as 300 pairs of eyes fixed on me. Some kids started making meowing sounds. Others whispered and pointed. I gathered my belongings and fled to the restroom, where I remained until the bell rang. That night, I went home and wept into my pillow until my eyes were swollen shut. But something shifted in me that day. Instead of completely breaking, I got angry. Truly angry. I started exercising consistently, studying harder than ever, and planning my escape from that narrow-minded town where Tyler Morrison was considered admirable. 10 years later, I was living in Chicago as a successful marketing director. I had built a life Tyler could never imagine. Traveling internationally for work, owning a downtown condominium with city views, dating interesting people who valued my intellect. I'd completely forgotten about him and his cruel prophecy until I literally bumped into his father at a coffee shop. David Morrison was nothing like his son. At 52, he was distinguished, kind, and genuinely interested in what I had to say. When my latte lid came off and spilled all over his morning newspaper, he chuckled warmly and offered to buy me another. "I'm David," he said, extending his hand with a sincere smile. "Sarah," I replied, not making any connection yet. We spoke for 2 hours about everything: books, travel, architecture, life philosophy. He was recently divorced, worked as an architect, and possessed this gentle manner of listening that made me feel truly heard. When he asked for my number, I gave it without any hesitation. Our first date was dinner at a quiet Italian place downtown. David was captivating, well-traveled, emotionally intelligent, funny in a dry way that reminded me of my favorite professors. Everything his son wasn't. "I have to ask," I said over dessert, "do you have children?" His face darkened slightly. "One son. We are not particularly close. He struggled with some personal issues over the years." I nodded sympathetically, still completely unaware of the connection. 6 months later, David proposed with a vintage Art Deco ring that was exactly what I would have chosen for myself. I said yes immediately, feeling like the luckiest woman alive. We planned a small ceremony at his house, a beautiful Victorian he'd restored himself with incredible attention to detail. The morning of our wedding, as I was getting ready in his antique mirror, David casually mentioned his son might stop by. "Tyler's been asking to meet you," he said, adjusting his tie. "I thought today might be the perfect opportunity." My blood turned to ice water. The name Tyler Morrison hadn't crossed my mind in months, but hearing it on my wedding day made my stomach drop. I sat down heavily on David's antique vanity chair, staring at my reflection in my wedding dress. "Sarah, are you all right?" David asked, concern creeping into his voice. I turned to face my soon-to-be husband, this kind, gentle man who had no idea what his son had put me through. "David, what's Tyler's middle name?" "James, Tyler James Morrison." "Why?" My high school yearbook flashed through my mind. Tyler J. Morrison, class clown, most likely to peak in high school. The same Tyler who had systematically destroyed my self-esteem for 2 years. "Nothing," I lied, "just curious." The ceremony was perfect. David's eyes welled with tears as I walked down the makeshift aisle in his living room. Our friends and family watched as we exchanged vows in front of the fireplace he'd built with his own hands. When he kissed me, I felt like the luckiest woman alive. Until the front door opened during our first dance. Tyler Morrison walked in, looking exactly as I remembered, just softer around the edges. His eyes scanned the room until they landed on me, still in David's arms. I watched the recognition dawn on his face, followed immediately by horror. "Dad!" Tyler's voice cracked. "What the hell is going on?" David released me and turned toward his son. "Tyler, you made it. I'd like you to meet my wife, Sarah." Tyler's mouth fell open. He stared at me like he'd seen a ghost. "Sarah Chen Morrison now," I said, extending my hand with a smile that could cut glass. "Nice to see you again, Tyler." The room went silent. Our guests sensed the tension, but couldn't understand it. "You two know each other?" David asked. "We went to high school together," I said smoothly. "Different social circles, but you know how it is in small towns." Tyler's face had gone pale. "Dad, can I talk to you privately?" "After the reception," David said firmly. "This is our wedding day." For the next 3 hours, I watched Tyler squirm. He tried to avoid me, but at every turn I was there. When he went to get a drink, I was at the bar. When he stepped outside for air, I followed. "This is so messed up," he whispered when we were alone on the back patio. "You married my father." "I married a wonderful man who happened to be your father," I corrected. Though I have to say, the apple fell very far from the tree. Tyler ran his hands through his hair. "Sarah, look, about high school." "About high school what?" I interrupted. "About how you made my life miserable? About how you convinced everyone I was worthless? About how you stood up in front of everyone and said I'd die alone and forgotten?" He winced. "I was a kid. I was stupid." "You were cruel," I said evenly. "But don't worry, I'm not here for revenge. I'm here because I love your father. The fact that this drives you crazy is just a bonus." Tyler stared at me. "He doesn't know, does he? About what I did to you?" "No," I said. "And I don't plan to tell him. David loves you despite your flaws, and I won't be the one to destroy that relationship. But understand this. I'm not the scared 16-year-old you used to torment. I'm your stepmother now, and you will treat me with respect." The color drained from his face completely. When we returned to the reception, Tyler made his excuses and left. David was disappointed but not surprised. "He'll come around," David said, pulling me close. "He just needs time to adjust." Over the next few months, Tyler avoided family gatherings. David would call him, but Tyler always had excuses. Work was busy, he wasn't feeling well. His car was in the shop. "I don't understand what's gotten into him," David confided one evening over dinner. "Ever since our wedding, he's been distant." I reached across the table and took his hand. "Maybe he's just processing the changes. It can't be easy seeing your parent with someone new." David squeezed my fingers. "You're probably right. I just wish he'd give you a chance. I know you two would get along if he'd let you." If only he knew. The first major holiday was Thanksgiving. David insisted Tyler come, and for once Tyler couldn't find an excuse. He arrived looking like he was attending his own funeral. Throughout dinner, Tyler was polite but strained. He called me Sarah instead of avoiding my name entirely, answered when I asked him direct questions, and even helped clear the table. But I could see the effort it took. After dinner, while David was in the kitchen loading the dishwasher, Tyler cornered me in the dining room. "This is so messed up," he said in a low voice. "Every time I see you, all I can think about is what a jerk I was in high school." "Good," I said, continuing to stack plates. "You should think about that." "Sarah, please, I know I don't deserve it, but can we just start over for my dad's sake?" I looked at him, really looked at him. He was 32 now, and life had clearly humbled him. He worked as a mechanic, lived in a small apartment, and from what David had told me, struggled with depression and anxiety. He wasn't the confident bully who had made my life hell anymore. "I don't need an apology, Tyler," I said finally. "I don't need closure or forgiveness or any of that therapeutic nonsense. What I need is for you to be a good son to your father, Because he loves you more than you probably deserve. Tyler's eyes filled with tears. I know he does. And I know I've been letting him down. So stop, I said simply. Stop making this about us and make it about him. From that day forward, something shifted. Tyler started calling David more often. He showed up for family dinners. He even brought a girlfriend around Christmas, a sweet teacher named Rebecca, who clearly adored him. But the real test came 6 months later when David had a mild heart attack. I was at the hospital within minutes of getting the call, still in my work clothes, frantically trying to reach Tyler. When he finally arrived, his eyes were red and panicked. How is he? Tyler asked the moment he saw me. Stable, I said. The doctor said it was minor, but they want to keep him overnight for observation. We sat together in the waiting room for hours. Tyler kept apologizing for taking so long to get there, for not being a better son, for not calling enough. I finally told him to stop. Your father knows you love him, I said. That's all that matters. When David was finally awake and receiving visitors, Tyler broke down completely. He told his father everything, how sorry he was for being distant, how much he loved him, how grateful he was to have him in his life. Later, as Tyler was leaving, he stopped by my chair. Thank you, he said quietly. For what? For making him happy. For being here when he needed you. He paused, struggling with the words. For being better than I ever was. 2 years into my marriage, Tyler and Rebecca got engaged. At their engagement party, Tyler stood up to make a toast. I want to thank everyone for being here tonight, he began, his voice steady. But most of all, I want to thank my dad for teaching me what real love looks like, and Sarah for showing me what grace looks like. He raised his glass and looked directly at me. Sarah, when we were younger, I said some terrible things to you, things I've regretted every day since. You could have held on to that anger, could have made this family impossible. But instead, you chose kindness. You chose to love my father, and by extension, you chose to love me, despite everything. I don't deserve that kind of grace, but I'm grateful for it. The room was quiet. David looked confused but proud. I felt tears prick my eyes. To second chances, Tyler said, and the people who give them to us. Everyone raised their glasses and drank. After the party, David pulled me aside. What was Tyler talking about? About saying terrible things to you? I thought about lying, about protecting Tyler's secret forever. But David deserved the truth. High school wasn't easy for me, I said carefully. Tyler was part of a group that made things difficult. But people change, David. The man who toasted me tonight isn't the boy who hurt me 15 years ago. David's face darkened. He bullied you? My son bullied you? He was a teenager, I said quickly. A hurt, confused teenager who probably needed help he wasn't getting. Look at him now. Look at the man he's become. That's what matters. David was quiet for a long time. Did you know who he was when we met? No, I said honestly. I had no idea you were his father until our wedding day. And you stayed anyway? I took his hands. David, I fell in love with you not despite your son, but including him. Tyler is part of who you are, and I chose all of you. 3 months later, Tyler asked if he could take me to lunch, just the two of us. We went to the same coffee shop, where David and I had first met. Tyler ordered for both of us. He remembered that I liked oat milk lattes. I need to tell you something, he said once we were seated. I've been going to therapy. That's great, Tyler. I've been talking about high school, about what I did to you and other kids, about why I did it. He stared into his coffee. My therapist says I was acting out because of my parents' divorce, because I felt powerless, because I was hurting. But that doesn't excuse it. No, I agreed. It doesn't. I want to make amends, he said. Real amends, not just to you, but to everyone I hurt. I studied his face. He was serious, determined in a way I'd never seen before. What does that look like? I asked. I've been reaching out to people from our class apologizing. Some of them won't talk to me, and I understand that, but some have, and it's been healing. He pulled out his phone and showed me a message thread. Names I recognized from high school, people Tyler had targeted. Some had responded with anger, others with acceptance, a few with their own apologies for standing by and doing nothing. I saved you for last, he said, because what I did to you was the worst, and because you're family now. I was quiet for a long time, processing what he was asking of me. Tyler, I said finally, I don't need your apology to move forward. I've already done that work. I know, he said, but I need to give it anyway. He took a deep breath and looked directly into my eyes. Sarah, I am profoundly sorry for what I did to you in high school. I was cruel and I was wrong, and I caused you real pain. There's no excuse for my behavior, and I don't expect your forgiveness. But I want you to know that I see you now. I see the incredible woman you are, the way you love my father, the grace you've shown our family. I'm sorry it took me so long to see it. And I'm sorry for every day I made you feel less than the amazing person you are. I felt tears streaming down my face before I realized I was crying. Thank you, I whispered. We sat in silence for a while, both of us emotional. Can I ask you something? Tyler said eventually. I nodded. Do you think Dad would be proud of me if he knew the whole story? Would he be proud of how I'm trying to change? I thought about David, the man who saw the best in everyone, who believed in second chances, who had raised a son despite his own struggles. I think, I said carefully, that your father would be proud of the man you're becoming, not because you're perfect, but because you're trying to be better. Tyler smiled through his tears. I really love him, you know, and I really love that he found you. I love him too, I said. And Tyler, I'm proud of you too. When I got home that evening, David was in his workshop building a bookshelf for our bedroom. I told him about lunch, about Tyler's therapy, about his apologies to our former classmates. I had no idea he was struggling so much back then, David said, setting down his chisel. I was so wrapped up in the divorce, in my own pain. I failed him. You didn't fail him, I said firmly. You were dealing with your own trauma. And look at him now. He's taking responsibility, doing the work, becoming the man you raised him to be. David pulled me into his arms. How did I get so lucky? First, Tyler turns his life around, and then I get to marry the most incredible woman I've ever met. Luck had nothing to do with it, I said, kissing his cheek. We chose each other. All of us. Last month, Tyler and Rebecca got married. Tyler asked me to walk him down the aisle since his mother lived across the country and they weren't close. Are you sure? I asked when he called with the request. Absolutely, he said. You're the reason I believe in redemption. You're the reason I know people can change. I can't think of anyone I'd rather have by my side. On his wedding day, as we stood at the back of the church waiting for our cue, Tyler turned to me. I used to think about that day in the cafeteria sometimes, he said quietly. About what I said to you. And I'd wonder what my life would have been like if I'd been kinder. Don't torture yourself with hypotheticals, I said, adjusting his lapel. I'm not, he said, smiling. I'm just grateful that despite everything, we ended up as family. The music started, and we walked down the aisle together. David beamed at us from the front row, tears in his eyes as he watched his son and his wife approach the altar together. During the reception, David and I danced to At Last by Etta James. As he spun me around, I caught sight of Tyler and Rebecca at their sweetheart table, laughing at something Rebecca's little nephew had said. What are you thinking about? David asked, following my gaze. Just how funny life is, I said. How the worst things sometimes lead to the best things. What do you mean? I looked up at my husband, this man who had given me everything I never knew I needed. If Tyler hadn't been so cruel to me in high school, I might never have become the person I am today. I might never have been strong enough to build a life worth living, and I definitely wouldn't have been sitting in that coffee shop the day you spilled my latte. David considered this. So, in a weird way, we owe our marriage to Tyler's teenage stupidity? In the weirdest way possible, I agreed. He laughed and dipped me dramatically. Remind me to thank him in my father of the groom speech. Don't you dare, I said. But I was laughing too. Later that night, as we were getting ready for bed, David asked me something that had clearly been on his mind. Do you ever wonder what would have happened if you'd known who I was from the beginning? If you'd known Tyler was my son? I thought about it honestly. Probably nothing, I admitted. I probably would have run the other way. And now, I looked at this man who had changed my life in ways I couldn't have imagined, who had shown me what real love looked like, who had given me a family, even if it came with complications. Now I know that the best things in life are usually the ones that scare you the most. Today, 3 years after our wedding, Tyler calls me every Sunday. Sometimes we talk about work, sometimes about Rebecca, sometimes about David. Occasionally we talk about high school, but not in the way you might expect. We talk about how it shaped us, how it taught us both different lessons about kindness and cruelty, about the power we have to hurt or heal each other. Tyler has become a leader in anti-bullying programs at local schools. He speaks to teenagers about the long-term consequences of their actions, about how words can follow someone for decades. Rebecca tells me the kids love him because he doesn't lecture them. He just tells them his story and lets them draw their own conclusions. He's good at it, she told me over coffee last week. The kids trust him because he's been where they are. David retired last year, and we spend our mornings hiking, our afternoons reading, and our evenings cooking elaborate meals together. Tyler and Rebecca come over every Friday for dinner, and we've started a tradition of playing board games afterward. Tyler's competitive streak has evolved into something more playful, and watching him and David argue over Monopoly rules is one of my favorite things in the world. Sometimes when I'm cleaning up after these dinners, I think about 16-year-old me crying in her bedroom, convinced that Tyler Morrison was right, that she would die alone and forgotten. I wish I could go back and tell her that someday Tyler Morrison would be arguing with her husband about whether Boardwalk is worth the investment, while his wife helps her load the dishwasher and plan their upcoming vacation to Italy. I wish I could tell her that the boy who tried to define her worth would someday introduce her to others as my stepmother Sarah. She's incredible, with genuine pride in his voice. I wish I could tell her that sometimes the people who hurt us the most become the ones who help us understand our own strength. But mostly, I wish I could tell her that Tyler Morrison was wrong about everything except one thing. She would not be forgotten. She would be remembered, cherished, and loved by a family she never could have imagined. A family that included, impossibly, Tyler Morrison himself.